Yeah, that's right, we are doing a recap on COP, or as I've called it, Coptastrophe, because it really backfired in Boris's face.
The clock ticks for planet Earth. Can COP26 deliver?
Around 120 world leaders are gathering in Glasgow for the talks.
With one principal aim, to get the world to commit to reduce carbon emissions and to avoid a climate catastrophe.
It's 1 minute to midnight on that doomsday clock, and we need to act now.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Political X. For more knowledge and updates on UK, European and US politics, make sure you subscribe to this channel.
Queen will miss the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow, following advice to rest.
What you might not have heard is the reason as to why, which was reported in the Metro as the Queen being knackered. I wonder what she was watching. Luckily, secret filming took place within Buckingham Palace.
An arrest warrant was issued for Epstein for sexual assault of a minor.
Yes.
In July, he was invited to Windsor Castle to your daughter, Princess Beatrice's 18th birthday. Why would you do that?
At the end of the day, we weren't that close. He was a very, very close friend.
Elsewhere, there was interesting media reports coming about the current state of the UK and its issue with sewage, which seems to be being pumped into our rivers. The BBC reporter caught this on tape.
I'll let you guys be the judge of what is coming out of this pipe, but I can tell you one thing, by standing, just a couple of meters from it, it smells like absolute.
And it wasn't just our rivers, we've also got issues with the sea, of which I've actually had a personal experience somewhat similar to this, except it was with a large condom.
There's wet wipes, there's sanitary towels, there's tampons. We've had swimmers reporting swimming along and having a sanitary towel stick to their face.
There is an element of laughter to be had here, but in all seriousness, we are pumping raw sewage and crap into our rivers and seas, yet we're meant to be highlighting to the world that we are going to be the leading contenders for change in the world. One of the other highlights during all of this was seeing Mike Graham get his ass handed to him.
Morning, Mike.
Oh, hello. What are you glued to, Cameron?
Just your screen, unfortunately.
Unfortunately? What do you do for a living, Cameron?
I'm a carpenter.
A carpenter, right. So how safe is that for the climate?
Well, I work with timber, which is a much more sustainable material rather than concrete. I also
But you work with trees that have been cut down then, don't you?
It's a sustainable building practice.
How is it sustainable if you're killing trees?
Because it's regenerative, you can grow trees.
Right. Well, you can grow all sorts of things, can't you?
Well, you can't grow concrete.
You can. See you, Cameron. Cheerio.
And that wasn't even the end of the news being weird and wacky. GB News put in their 2% and tried to put in that Greta Thunberg was some sort of force of evil for trying to save the planet.
When the Swedish teen speaks, we are meant to listen.
Has she been invited? Apparently not.
I thought she said she wasn't going.
She's really a religious nutter.
Better that than being an old racist.
I think she's just an angry young woman.
She does like the limelight after all.
How dare she?
Yet little or nothing was said about Boris Johnson taking a flight up to Scotland when he could have taken the train. He is adding to the carbon footprint, but this isn't the first time he's done it. He did the exact same thing when he took a trip down to Cornwall, and it almost feels like he's trying to be presidential, and it reminds me of these two horrible, horrible creatures from the depths of the abyss. And it was going to get worse because George Eustace stepped in trying to defend the flight, as well as a few other MPs, but Susanna Reid completely held him to task.
There is another transport issue going on, which is that Boris Johnson is flying back from Glasgow to London rather than getting the train. Now, isn't there a little bit of irony in the fact that he has told this roundtable of leaders of developing nations, when it comes to tackling climate change, words without action, without deeds, are absolutely pointless? Isn't he describing himself there?
Well, look, I think what he was appealing in his opening speech was that governments had to set ambitious targets to reduce our carbon emissions, to tackle climate change, and put in place the policies to do that. And that can be decarbonising your energy supply, it can be decarbonising transport, it can be decarbonising transport.
So it's decarbonising transport. Why not take the train? You can work on the train. You could take a secure train. It's not that difficult. And yet, of course, Boris has to look presidential.
It needs governments to take the right policy steps to get there. Of course, when you do events of this sort...
It's about your actions, not just your words. It's all very well for us to lecture other people on the policies that they should introduce. But if actually then you get into a form of transport which has multiple carbon emissions to an alternative you could have taken simply because you haven't got the time to take the greener alternative.
Of course you've got the time. You can work on the bus or the train. It's not impossible. They had a battle bus for Brexit, for God's sake. And yet he's saying, no, it's too much hassle.
It undermines everything we're trying to do, doesn't it?
Well, look, I understand that people will sometimes make that point. The point I'd make is a broader one, which is the world has to come together and take make some quite ambitious commitments to reduce our carbon emissions, to tackle climate change, and then to have the policy agenda behind it.
Kennedy, Obama, even David Cameron said, what can we do to make a difference? What can we do to make an immediate impact through our own actions? And Boris doesn't want to do that because he wants to look like a president. What came next was absolutely priceless about, getting world leaders to take action and put in sensible policies. Have a listen to George Eustice say that, and then have a listen to what Boris said.
We need world leaders and governments around the world to make ambitious commitments, and then we need them to have the policy agenda to deliver it.
I think we certainly could start by rewilding our oceans. There's a lot of space to do that.
We could feed some of the human beings to the animals. Cows burp a great deal and emit gases, and we have to encourage them to stop burping.
The look given to Boris there is up there with Trump talking about disinfectant.
And then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and
It frankly got worse for Boris because he is eviscerated by a reporter from CNN.
So, as you know better than I do, there are coal fields coal digging planned for Cumbria in this country. And would you say that at this point, given everything you're saying to me now, you would intervene to stop that?
I don't have the legal powers. That's something for local planning.
But local planning has already ruled on it and it's come back to the government.
I love that quizzical look, but there's an interesting twist that's going to take place here that is going to involve Owen Patterson, because basically Boris is going to say that you can't do anything retrospectively.
And it's going to go down to zero by 2020.
So why not just say as a matter of goodwill after this summit that you're hosting and for everything you're saying? Because I understand it's come back to the government, to the minister in charge.
Because we are a legally scrupulous and punctilious country, and there's a planning decision that has to be taken, but I'm not the planning authority.
But he is the Prime Minister and he could change that law, and this is why it becomes really interesting when you look at what he's doing with Owen Patterson, because right now he's completely denying anything to do with getting involved with this. But he's more than happy to get involved retrospectively with other decisions. This is Owen Patterson, who was working for 2 firms as a consultant as well as being an MP, and it came into conflict. Have a listen to what he has to say about that though, because it's really interesting that Boris is saying on the one hand he can't act retrospectively in terms of dealing with coal mines being opened, even though it's on the Minister of Scotland's desk, Gove.
Thanks to the efforts of my colleagues and the government, we now have a chance to build a proper system based on the rules of natural justice.
So he can't act retrospectively involving coal mines, but he can bail his mate out until, of course, he gets a huge amount of abuse from the public, which we will discuss, and within 24 hours, Owen Patterson has to resign.
For 5 years, Mr Patterson earned more than £100,000 a year on top of his MP salary by consulting for 2 firms. Last week, the Parliamentary Standards Committee ruled he had lobbied for these firms in a, quote, egregious case of paid advocacy.
And 4 of the 5 members on that committee were Conservatives, and they still voted against Owen Patterson. Boris comes out and tries to defend it and flip it around in Parliament so that they can protect Owen Patterson.
The issue in this case is whether a member of this House had a fair opportunity to make representations in this case, or whether as a matter of natural justice, our procedures in this House allow for proper appeal.
Do you not feel even a tiny bit grubby doing this?
I really don't.
The case of Owen Patterson really highlighted this sort of anomaly.
This almost becomes topsy-turvy as one MP refused to vote and was fired, and Owen Patterson was kept, and then she was reinstated and Owen Patterson was removed.
One MP told us they received a week's worth of angry emails in just one night.
Well, my office, unfortunately, was vandalised this morning. Tory sleeves painted all over it. It's not been a great 24 hours for the government because, unfortunately, they laid a motion in the House of Commons that conflated 2 things and asked MPs to vote on it. And that was not bright. We should have dealt with the case of Mr. Owen Patterson first and then sought cross-party support for reforming the system.
So, again, Boris has absolutely made a hash of this. Not only has this destroyed any gains that he could have had from doing COP26 and looking presidential, he has also bungled this because he didn't deal with the Owen Patterson thing first and then try and get a cross-party committee thing, which meant he had to get rid of Owen Patterson, and that has really, really hacked off a number of his own MPs. But not only that, get ready to have a listen to what people thought of this in Owen Patterson's constituency and Boris's constituency. It is unreal. There are rumours already kicking around that Boris's majority, which was 5,000 in the 2019 election, has dropped to 100 majority, 100 votes.
I've just heard today that he's resigned, and I'm very pleased about it.
Why are you pleased about it?
Well, I think it should be fair ruling, not one rule for one and one for another. I think what he did was underhanded, and it shouldn't be overlooked.
I'm not Conservative. I vote for Labour, to be honest, but he's a good man.
It's not responsible, it's not fair with he's supposed to be running a constituency and it's not okay.
I am a Tory voter, I've been Conservative, but with the way it's going now, I'm left. Who am I going to vote for? I'm really disgusted with that man.
They're a bunch of criminals, don't get me started. Well, I just don't understand what's going on in this country. My oldest son lives, well, he's back now, but he was in Denmark for 8 years, living and working out there. They think we're a bunch of idiots over here.
I did vote for Conservative, I'd never vote for him again. Yeah, no, I believed Boris at the beginning, but I don't believe a word he says now. He's the biggest liar out of all of them.
So before we go to the final section, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you've gone this far, you're probably enjoying the content. On top of that, we've got a set of Political X films in the films playlist. Please check those out. They are not being watched enough. There's some really amazing content in there. Things are going to go from bad to worse for Boris because Christina Amanpour from CNN is going to eviscerate him in a number of questions, and he just looks bamboozled.
But you still won't tell me why your government won't intervene to stop the coal in Cumbria, because I understand it's come to Minister, Secretary, however you describe it here, Gove. But in any event, let's move on to Cambo. So what's going around on social media? You brought up the national treasure, Sir David Attenborough. And there you all were in the plenary. He's 95 years old. He was wearing masks and you weren't. It's all over the place.
Right.
You weren't wearing a mask yesterday, sitting next to 95-year-old national treasure David Attenborough.
Right, I've been, wearing a mask when in confined spaces with people that I don't normally meet, and I think it's up to people to take a judgment about whether they're at a reasonable distance from someone, and whether they're with someone they don't normally meet. That's the approach we take.
I really doubt that David Attenborough hangs out with Boris Johnson on a regular basis. But interestingly enough, do you remember what Dominic Cummings said about Boris and the Queen?
This is terrible, but the people who are dying are essentially all over 80. And we can't kill the economy just because of people dying over 80. The normal thing on a Wednesday evening is to go and see the Queen. And therefore he was going to go and see the Queen. He said, well, that's what I do every Wednesday. Sod this. I'm going to go and see her. So I said to him, there's people in this office who are isolating. You might have coronavirus. I might have coronavirus. You can't go and see the Queen. What if you go and see her and then give the Queen coronavirus?
I move on to COVID because
Yes.
there's a big spike in COVID in this country, and it's, the record here is worse than it is elsewhere around Europe.
Well, I dispute that, but anyway, go on.
But the facts and the figures show it.
Again, I would dispute that.
Shall I read them?
You can read whatever you like, but...
Well, first of all, let me ask you the question.
Yeah.
You have said you're going to stick to Plan A, which is no mandatory masks, keep the vaccines going, none of the social distancing or vaccine proofs that some of the other countries are doing. But the NHS Confederation and the British Medical Association have just come out and said Plan B should be implemented now. In other words, masks when it's appropriate in crowded places, some sort of social distancing. And they're saying, maybe even vaccine proof. Why would you not? It's a very cheap and easy, and people are used to masks. Why would you not do that? They say there'll be potentially yet another terrible pressure on the NHS this winter.
Well, I'm watching the data the whole time. Thank you.
That was such a condescending little thank you he threw in there.
We're all looking at the data. We've got to remain very cautious. We've got to remain humble in the face of nature and what the disease can do. At the moment, we don't see any reason to deviate from the plan that we're on.
It's frankly amazing how quickly all of COP26 got derailed, both by Owen Patterson and by the CNN reporter, Christina Amanpour. It says everything about Boris. It doesn't matter how much good he does, he'll bungle it up somewhere along the line. And I think the Owen Patterson thing is really going to cost him votes in the election. I think it's not just about economics, as Michael Heseltine had said. There's a lot more to it, and the number of scandals that they've done, which I will be doing videos on. There will be a Tory video, part 1, 2 and 3 coming out at some point. But it's just Boris and foot and mouth disease. It really is, and it's time and time again with this man. Anyway, as promised, a little funny clip for you to watch of a protester who superglued himself to the street, and then have a look at his reaction afterwards.
The government's response to the climate emergency in terms of the number of heat pumps that they're looking to put in. They're looking to put in 90,000 out of 25 million. That's less than 1/3 of 1%.
Do you regret the gluing?
Yeah, it's not one of my better moves.
I hope you enjoyed my political observations this week. If you'd like to support me, please share the video with others and post about it on social media. If you're keen for more, subscribe, comment, like, and hit that notification button. Thanks for listening, and see you next time on Political X.